Come on, is that doing it? Yes, it is. It says that we're recording now, so don't swear or put your finger up your nose. That's how we always start these things.
Try my best.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Not bad. Finally stopped raining for 10 minutes.
Looks like it's about to start here, but never mind.
Yeah. It won't last long.
So we're catching you between school runs.
Yes, she only does 3 hours, so it's pretty crammed for fitting a bit of work in the midst of dropping her and picking her back up again.
I mean, I know you've put a post on various groups around the place, but just in case nobody's seen though, tell us who you are.
So I'm Vicky, and I'm a bookkeeper.
Should you stand up to say that?
Recently set up on my own, and kind of set up my own business and come away from the 9 to 5 that I've been doing previously. Started my kind of courses and training quite a few years ago now, and have kind of done it steadily alongside starting a family, kind of other jobs, and kind of doing it along the way. And my background before was education, so quite a switch over in a lot of respects.
Isn't it? Yeah.
I've worked in FE colleges within sports and kind of special educational needs departments, kind of managing those areas for the last 15 odd years since my kind of early 20s I went into FE. So I kind of progressed through that into a management role, and I think the more I kind of developed different skills from a management role, I started wanting to, venture out into other areas. And there was elements of kind of money and kind of financial side of things when I was managing a department that I had to look after. And it was a really off kind of random off chance conversation with somebody who'd done the bookkeeping qualifications to set up as self-employed. I really like the idea of working for myself with a young family, so I had the flexibility to be at home. And anybody who's ever been involved in education will know that there's just no flexibility, and the hours can be quite long. Everyone thinks you rock up at 8:30 and you leave at 3:30. It's not like that at all. So I wanted kind of something to change. So while I was still in the job, I started doing my qualifications in bookkeeping, and I've gone through those up to kind of level 4, done my self-assessment qualification and payroll as well. Eventually I'll do my kind of quals for limited companies, but at the moment I just want to focus on kind of sole trader, self-employed people.
Yeah, it can get a bit complicated, limited company. I had a limited company for a while and I just couldn't be bothered with the amount of paperwork. No, I can't be bothered.
Yeah, there's a lot more hoops you have to jump through and a lot of other bits and bobs you have to do. It has its benefits and whatnot in terms of going limited from being sole trader, but for somebody like myself, and then for the likes of majority of driving instructors, sole trader kind of fits what is necessary and kind of what you need.
I generally say to people who are coming on board, if you're already a limited company, then you can make use of it. But if I wouldn't register as a limited company to be a sole trader, it's just the disadvantages outweigh the benefits, just in the time you've got to spend, and of course the money you've got to spend to get your books done, because it's a lot more involved.
It costs more as a limited company to kind of say have my services than if you were a sole trader, definitely. So it's something that I might venture to in the future, but I'm quite happy where I'm at the moment. Kind of getting on board sole traders, all different backgrounds and professions. But one of the things I've been doing at the moment, like you said, with the post and the guide that I've been kind of publicising around some of the groups, is kind of trying to help people see what they can claim, making sure they're aware of all of that. And therefore, if that led to anybody wanting to kind of enlist my services, that's great. Or I did have a call a couple of weeks ago off the back of posting. Somebody just wanted a bit of advice. So happy to answer questions, and obviously also happy that if someone wants to go down the route of having a bookkeeper, do it for them. You don't need an accountant. You don't need a lot of people think you need an accountant or a chartered accountant. A bookkeeper with my qualifications can do everything for you, right up to filing your self-assessment with no involvement of an accountant at all. So everything that I set out from what I do, even from a cost point of view, that's kind of it. If you're a sole trader, there's nothing else. There's nobody else we need to get involved where there's other costs. It can all be covered. But I think the misconception is bookkeepers can't do some of these things like self-assessment, like an accountant.
I think we're led to that conclusion because the HMRC website kind of leans towards it.
Yeah,
yes,
it mentions accountants a lot. It doesn't really mention the bookkeeping side. And I think the qualifications now that a lot of, say colleagues, we don't physically work together because we're all on our own, but all bookkeepers in the communities that I'm involved in, a lot of them work solely on their own. They kind of link up if necessary, because there's a couple of things, and there are some bits that an accountant would need to do in some instances. But from you kind of average sole trader, a bookkeeper can kind of do everything for you and have just the same level of knowledge on all the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts that an accountant would have.
Well, I think, as part of my role at LDC, taking care of all of our instructors and the 500 of them, I generally say, as long as you can account for everything, if the Inland Revenue come and knock on your door and say, what you up to? And you can hand them a box and say that, they'll accept that as a true and accurate record.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But if you're saying, well, I did have it, but I lost it, or the dog ate it, well, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think as an industry, this anecdotally and my experience of talking to people in test centre waiting rooms, we don't get it right. And I hear all this sort of like, I tell you what you need to do, mate. If you're doing 2 lessons, just claim the fuel for it. Oh, hang on a minute. No. If you mess with the Inland Revenue.
The kind of, the classic one kind of within our profession is those chats down the pub with your mate who, oh, so-and-so did this for me, or I do it this way because it saves you this. And all they've got to do is start digging about. If you're inspected and they ask to come and, look at your books and your accounts and what you've got and your evidence of what you've got, if you're claiming X amount of pounds for something and you've got no traceable evidence of having purchased or paid for that, they can quite easily strike that out of your record for that tax year, and then that straight away ups your liabilities and you end up in...
Absolutely. Well, of course, as well, people think that you've got to keep records for 6 years, and people think the Inland Revenue can only go back 6 years. They can go back to the year you were born.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what you're obliged to keep. So I'm filing tax returns now for the kind of 2021 year. And they're obliged to keep hold of those physical records till I think it's 2027. But they can dig in and out of everything. And if you've got a business account, then they can have a look at any other accounts in your name and those kind of things. So, it's really important that you get it right and that you do it properly, because if they come to you and have a look at it, find a few discrepancies and tweak what you claimed against straight away, you paid this much tax in that year, they've pulled a few things out that you can't justify properly, straight away you now owe them a bit more tax.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that's the case. Don't ask me how I know.
Yeah, we won't go down that route.
But I mean, my experience of the reason I was happy to do this and to sort of showcase what you're doing here is to help people. I see driving instructors struggle all the time. I speak to instructors every year in January where they're saying to me, I can't afford to pay my tax bill. And my answer is always, you can't afford not to. Yeah. And I say, well, how have you got into this state? And I give our guys the advice when they start: keep regular records, get used to doing little and often. And they all start with the best of intentions, and they're doing their records every day. Then I don't need to do it every day. I'll do it once a week. Then it's once a month, once a quarter. And then lo and behold, January the 27th, 28th, they're on their knees in the living room, surrounded by bits of paper that they can't remember what the hell it was for. And that invariably costs you money. And I imagine this is where, I mean, I do my own because I had to learn how to do it to be able to advise our new boys and girls. But in reality, if I was setting up a business now, I would probably, and I'm not just saying that because I'm talking, I would probably say to somebody, for that amount of money per month, I tell you what, you do that, because although I can do my books, it's probably going to take me 4 or 5 times longer than it would take you.
Yeah.
And that's time. Time is money.
Yeah.
So if I can get somebody
4 or 5 hours, you could be doing 4 or 5 more driving lessons. Well, straight away, then you're near enough paying for what you service you're going for. And the one big thing that kind of I do is try and get my clients out of the habit of, especially sole traders, that accountants in the past and some bookkeepers will look at it that come to me once a year with whatever you've recorded, and I'll work through it and I'll do it, and you've got a kind of set fee. I like to put my clients straight away, even though in the bookkeeping and accountancy world they'd be classed as small clients. I like to straight away get them on a monthly kind of setup. So once they've been with me for the first time and they want to stay with me, I'll work with them. So the clients that I've just finished up doing, and I've literally been filing tax returns for the tax year that's just ended in the beginning of April in the last couple of weeks. So they know what they owe, and they've not got to pay it till January, but they now know what they owe, so they can start prepping for that. But what I'll do with them now moving forward for this tax year we've just started is deal with them on a monthly basis. So I'll be messaging them, phoning them, whatever method of communication we develop, I'll be getting in touch with them and saying, right, have you got X, Y, and Z? So they send it to me then on a monthly basis. I'll keep a track of it for them. If I feel they've missed something, we can deal with it there and then in the month, rather than 12 months later. I don't remember what I did last April, last May.
I'm interested to know what made you change to that way of doing it.
What do you think? It's the conversations, and I've pulled in a couple of clients this year because I've newly kind of set up, so I've really kind of been going to kind of build up my client base. So obviously, as we just finished the tax year, it was a good time where some have come on board and said, right, can you do my tax return for me from last April through to this April? So these are the ones where, you know, bank statements with hundreds of transactions I've had sent through. You know, I can sit there and spend a day or two and work through it and then go back to them for more stuff. But obviously for me, if I can do that with them on a month by month basis, if there's something that I'm not sure on, they'll remember. If it was a couple of weeks ago, I'm asking some of my clients now to remember stuff from May, June, July last year. And they're like, gosh, I can't remember. I don't know if I've got that receipt, or I don't know if I've got that email evidence of buying something.
Yeah. So I mean, it does make sense to do things regularly. I can see how you nagging them to do it's going to help everybody.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need that, don't you? I'm just like the nagging person in the background going, can you give me this? Can you give me that? Right, I still need this. I still need the other. And to be honest, it works. Yeah.
Well, it's much better to be organised than to have the conversation in 12 months' time where they say, oh, I was going to do that.
Yeah.
Because my experience has always been, if I forget to do stuff, it always costs me. I always end up, you know, it's never in my favour.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, is that the sort of services you offer? Is it just that monthly thing? I can see how that would work, but
obviously I'll have those conversations with clients. I haven't had any clients come to me so far and go, no, I'm not interested in that, because when I talk through them the benefits of doing it, the other thing that I'll do with them is once they've given me, so say for example we get to the end of April, early May, I'll be messaging them saying send me X, Y, and Z. So by mid-May, for example, if I've done all of that, I'll have all their info in and I'll know where they're at. If I'm doing that month on month, they then get a quick email from me once every month with a quick report telling them where they're at with income, outcome, profit, and where that starts to knock on for their liabilities for national insurance and tax. So for me personally, when I talk through with any client the benefits of doing it that way, none of them so far have turned around to me and said, I don't want that. Do it all in one chunk at the end and I'll figure out what I owe when we get there.
Sure.
So I think that, and also I think by having that regular contact with them where you're speaking to them monthly, every couple of months, you know, it could be that you do it quarterly. It depends on the nature of the client and how often you can get in touch with them. But still, you're doing it at kind of shorter, regular intervals. And it just, for all of them that I've got on my book so far, you know, straight away, it's that I just feel relieved that I know that you know what you're doing. You're telling me what I need to do. And in the background, I'm doing it all for you, basically.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're going to go through, we've got a list of things to talk about, haven't we? We chatted about a little bit beforehand, but so you're about to give away your time and effort for free. So in return, you get a shameless plug. Now, I know you've got the thing on the website. So if people want to find out more or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is probably email or phone, if I'm honest. I have set up a website, and I am on Facebook, so they can message me through Messenger on Facebook. I've always, you know what it's like nowadays, we're all glued to our phones, so I've always got kind of some form of communication with me wherever I am. So I've got a Facebook page, VW Tax Returns.
Okay.
And I've got an email, that's just vwtaxreturns@hotmail.com. And my business phone number, I'll just read it off this thing on the wall because I haven't learned it yet. 07765 744 751. So any of those methods, I'm happy for people to get in touch. I'm normally pretty quick getting back to people, but depends what time you're messaging me and what day of the week it is and stuff. But I'm normally within a kind of day, I'm back to somebody if they've been in contact. So whatever suits you. If you don't feel comfortable with a phone call or that kind of thing to start with, drop me an email or a message in some other way with a bit of detail, and we can go from there. I know some people.
And you've got your expense Bible on your website that's free of charge.
Yeah, that's just one, and that kind of sets you into kind of some of my kind of emails that I'll do every so often with some kind of regular updates. So by going and downloading the expense Bible, you'll then kind of sign up to some of my emails, which you can unsubscribe to at any point in time. That's not a bother. But it might be that, you think about it now and you're not so sure, but every now and then I might just drop an email with some more information or a bit more about what I could offer to do for, driving instructors. And then it's just up to them then what they want to do with it. Or it might just trigger them to think, oh, I've got a question to ask or whatever. And I'm more than happy to kind of do bits like that and, answer if it's just a simple question. For me, it's just kind of making myself a bit more visible. And if I can be supportive, that at some point down the line, some people want to, utilize me from a business point of view, great. And if not, happy to just offer a bit of advice and guidance, because to be honest, as most people would know, HMRC is a bit of a minefield, and the goalposts change on an almost daily basis sometimes. So,
well, I always think that they're your best friend when they think you're playing by the rules, and your worst enemy when they think you're not. It can be a nightmarish organisation that'll kick your backside till your nose bleeds. They're ruthless once they get the teeth in you. If they sniff that you've done something untoward. And sometimes I've seen people get into trouble with HMRC by doing something wrong unintentionally.
Yeah. And that's kind of, then the difference of kind of setting up in such a way that you've got somebody who knows what they're doing. So you kind of, for the way I look at it, is I've kind of got you back a little bit because I'm working with you and helping you do stuff. And the other thing that I would offer for any client, if they're my client and I'm working with them as their bookkeeper, if HMRC did come knocking, there's a...
It was her.
Yeah.
She did it.
I'd happily then kind of offer, support to that person.
Sure.
In whatever way, shape or form they wanted. And, it's kind of been in place before where accountants, bookkeepers will sit in those meetings when HMRC book in to go and, do a bit of a fine comb on a business. Because as much as you sign off and say that you're happy with the work I've done and essentially they're your figures and your books, I'll know a bit more what I'm talking about based on potentially the questions HMRC might throw at somebody if they're doing that kind of audit. So again, it's just that sense of security and peace of mind.
Well, it's and for me, it's the time it can save. As we've been chatting here and looking at the things we're just about to chat about, it might be worthwhile doing this again in January.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm happy to do similar things. Or if off the back of this, people do come forward then with kind of any other bits, or we wanted to set something up differently, I'm happy to kind of jump in and do other bits in the future. You've given me access to kind of the group. I've promised not to kind of bombard with sales and spam all the time that people don't want, which is fine because I don't like that kind of thing myself. But that means that, if there's things that crop up, I'm happy to, be involved, offer my services in terms of just kind of guidance and advice.
So I've been looking at the list of stuff, expenses for driving instructors. So, let's work our way down the stuff here. So,
yeah, definitely.
You've separated the car out because there's some specifics.
I'll come to the car at the end because the car and then the kind of, fixed assets, capital allowance, that kind of thing, they're quite a meaty little subject to cover. There's some more kind of simple things that some people will be aware of, some won't. The big key thing to always think of with any business, obviously we're linking this directly to driving instructors, is HMRC look for the wholly and exclusively. That's the kind of key phrase that they sit in with. So is it wholly and exclusively for the business? Now, there are some things that will go through where you percentage off because you're actually using a big enough chunk that you do want to claim, but you've got to take a percentage off because it's not wholly and exclusively. And then there's other things where really, if it's not wholly and exclusively, like you've bought it for you and you're trying to push it through your books for your business, then, you just can't do it. So there's bits like that. But always think wholly and exclusively from a driving instructor point of view, is this for my work and my job?
So, that leads to sort of, working from home. For me, I've been working a lot from home, developing online content and stuff. So I have probably doubled what I would claim for my expenses from working from home. So I've always claimed a percentage of heat and light, but it's like I think 5% is what we sort of agreed.
Right.
I'm claiming more than that for the last 12 months because, well, I've been sat here a great deal of the time, and I've had to buy new kit to do what I'm doing here and all that sort of stuff. And the stuff that I'm using here is wholly and exclusively for the online stuff that I do. So working from home is a tricky one. I hear people claiming all sorts of stuff. You've got to be careful with this, haven't you?
Yeah, you do, because again, if HMRC come knocking, you've got to prove. If you've done a percentage cut, you've got to then justify what you've done. And I do this with varying clients, because some, like myself, I work, my job is based at home, so there's no element of I do anything anywhere else. And then for some, it's kind of a chunk of what they do. So driving instructors, obviously, predominantly are out on the road teaching, but there is a chunk of stuff that they'll do from home, whether it be returning kind of calls to customers who've inquired about lessons, doing their own online content to kind of advertise themselves, whether it be websites, pages, that kind of stuff. There'll be elements, or even just whether you do it yourself or you've got a bookkeeper or an accountant, pulling together all your paperwork and organising that. So there's two ways you can do your work from home expense claim, and it depends how kind of much input you want to put and how much effort you want to put into pulling together all the information. So the simplified expenses, as it says on the tin, are the most simplified way to do things. So the government have set up a flat rate scheme. You can claim anywhere between £10 and £26 a month, depending on how many hours you work from home, which it's always best, and I try to kind of have a look at it with clients to give me an idea of what their actual home bills are to work out the best option of the two. I don't think you can just sit there on any one person's case and say, you come to me and say what's best to do. Well, until I've looked at your bills at home and worked out the percentage calculation we'd use, I don't know for you if simplified actually is the better option than doing the apportionment costs. So I would work with clients to look at what they can claim on their home. So things like you said, gas and electric, council tax, water, home insurance, and then actually the interest on your mortgage or your rent, if you rent a property, they clump into that calculation for apportionment costs. So it allows you then to, there's a few formulas in it based on the number of rooms in your house, and what else that room is used for. And you've got to be careful, and I've done it here in my own home, which room you use in your house for an office. So my office is also our guest bedroom, and I won't ever solely turn this into just an office. Because the minute I turn it solely into an office, there's a few other charges that I become kind of liable for. If it's got a dual use like this, I'm using it as a bedroom for when we have visitors, then I'm quite within my rights to claim a percentage of my bills towards that, and also use the simplified expenses without having to register for things like business rates through the council, and doing other things that start to kind of add up your outgoings and your costs. But I'll always sit there with a client and decide simplified or apportionment, do the calculation on their bills for the house, and see which is the better of the two. And over time, circumstances might change. You might do less hours from home. So actually, it's easier than you sending over and working out your percentage cost from your house bills every month. It might be easier, because it's not that big an amount, to just stick with the flat rate and do it that way. But it's something that you can kind of look at.
Each individual circumstances are possibly going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, because I work from home for the full amount of my job, there's no element where I'm really, apart from a quick nip to visit a client, I'm at home. The bulk of what I do is at home, so it works out financially better for myself to do a percentage of all those bills kind of put together.
So I mean, we're not talking about cars yet, because we're going to come back to that later, aren't we? So it's just it's getting the things set up right and understanding. All the information's on the HMRC website, but by golly, there's a lot of it to sift through.
There is, and I think sometimes the terminology, it's a bit of a kind of there's bits I read, sometimes I have to read them a couple of times before it registers, because sometimes the way they word things doesn't help, and some of the kind of language used in them sometimes can confuse and make you think, right, so what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do? So yeah, it's just something that, like we were saying at the beginning, if you've got somebody who does fully understand the ins and outs of it all, is keeping on top of any changes that are happening.
Yeah.
You know full well that what then you're putting through is legitimate.
There's then sort of, phone and broadband as well. It's like, what percentage do you claim on that? For me, I've got a separate account that's out here in the office space in the garden.
Yeah.
I claim 100% of that.
Yeah.
But I claim a percentage of the one in the house because I sometimes work from in there too. But only a very small percentage. So again, it's a case of sitting down and working out what's what really.
And the problem sometimes some people do, especially with internet, is clump it in with the apportionment for the house costs. So your gas and electric, it kind of lumps into that one. You've got to look at it on its own. So like you've just said, for internet at home, if you've done a separate setup in the kind of an extra building in your house, that's great because it's easy to figure out. Otherwise, it's looking at how often you're in there and doing some maths basically to work out
a timesheet.
That's legitimate. It all comes back to maths. So if you're not great at maths, again, this is where sometimes it might be good for you to enlist someone to help. But internet, mobile phone as well, I set up. It was more because I didn't want to be hassled when I don't want to be hassled, but I set up a separate work phone. So clients and customers don't have my personal mobile. So if I go on holiday for the week, I can be like not uncontactable basically.
I thought it was just drug dealers that had two phones.
Yeah, I do often get talked about for having a burner phone, so to speak, on a regular basis, but I promise you it's not. It's not some kind of line of duty dodgy setup I've got going on.
Don't give anything away. I've got it all saved to watch.
Oh, okay. I won't spoil who H is then for you. So if you're using your home internet and you're using a personal mobile for work use, it's again sitting down, having that either on your own or if you're working with a bookkeeper, having those conversations about the amount of use that it is for one or the other, and justifying a percentage. So you were not just plucking a number out the air and going, I reckon it's roughly. We're doing a little bit of maths behind it. So again, if HMRC came knocking, you could show them an equation that says, this is how we got to this figure.
Yeah.
And
I think as long as they look at it and you can account for it and it looks, if it seems fair and reasonable, then they're going to go with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
If they're looking at it going, hang on a minute.
Yeah, if you're sitting there paying 60 quid a month on a phone contract where you're getting all your benefits from other bits, which some of them do nowadays personally, and you're putting 100% of that through as the business.
Yeah.
They're going to
be asked.
What do you do to ring your family and your friends when you're not working? Well, I use this. Well, therefore, then you've got to take a percentage cut for personal use.
I generally say to people, the last thing you ever want is the Inland Revenue looking at your tax return and going, we've got a couple of questions here. You don't want that. That's never going to end well for you.
All it'll mean is that at the end of that meeting, they'll be starting to work out, backtracking what you might owe because you've claimed too much of something for too long that you should have been paying 20% tax on, or more if you're a higher earner.
Once had a conversation with a chap from the Inland Revenue. Don't ask me how I know. And he was saying, so you're claiming a watch allowance. Yeah, he said, but I also noticed you have a Fiesta 1.6 TDCI. Z-Tech. Doesn't that have a clock? I think, it does. Well, you're not having the watch allowance then. Right. And that was just the start. So it's, again.
Like you say, you can sit there and do your online shopping and order this, that and the other, thinking, well, I might use it for this bit or it might link into that. But is it wholly and exclusively, and is it something that, is part of your business needs?
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose like this setup that I've got here is wholly and exclusively for my business.
Yeah.
The computer in the house isn't.
Yeah.
So I do have that sort of separated. And then, of course, if you're using, sort of software versus hardware, software can go through as an expense, but hardware would go through as a capital allowance. Or potentially, I suppose there's areas where some of that could be even clear.
It does, and some of that kind of can become, a lot of bookkeepers and accountants will have kind of a set amount. If you're kind of have got something that sits under, and a lot of them use kind of a rough figure of about £100, where if it's something that you're buying that would be deemed as then quite a small cost, it might be that it's then kind of just classed as an expense and it's kind of then written off and used in that year that you bought it. Yeah. When we're starting getting into kind of bigger costs, for example, you've gone and bought, I've had a client this year who set up on his own and he's bought a computer for home that only he uses, and he only uses it to do things like his invoicing, his ordering of parts and things, materials for the job that he does. So that's where, you know, you're talking several hundreds of pounds that you then might put through from kind of capital costs, because it's something then that you're going to keep in your business for kind of a longer amount of time. And
so just write it down over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come to that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, we'll come down to the fixed assets and that sort of stuff. So postage, stationery, advertising, I mean, they're all...
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of little bit of things that people don't think to put through, and I'll speak to clients in different professions, like, right, do you have this? Oh, yeah, I do. Well, right, we'll give it to me then, because we can put it as an expense. If you've got, you know, if you've got postage, stationery, if you're buying things that, again, wholly and exclusively for business, it might seem like little amounts, a few quid here, a few quid there, but over the course of 12 months, that soon adds up and it's worth doing it. Advertising, so if you're flyers, business cards, things like that you might give out to people or give to your current customers to pass on in driving instructor world. They might pass on to friends who are coming to ages, who are ready to start lessons. Anything like that you do that you incur a cost with. If you've got costs for setting up website, people pay for kind of their website setup, whether it be developing the website, that kind of cost, or your use of domains and all that kind of stuff, where you can have monthly costs to have the domain name that you want. All of that is, you know, if it's all to do with solely advertising and promoting and use for your business, it's another expense that can go on the list.
I think, like you said, that these things really do start. I keep all of my stuff on a spreadsheet, and it's surprising how these little things mount up.
They do. Yeah, I went in the shops the other day and I needed some sticky labels. They were 69p, but I tapped it on the business card. You know, if those little bits, and they don't seem like much at the time, that I could quite easily have just chucked it in. But I was like, no, that's for work. It needs to sit on this if I pick up a few envelopes, because I'm sending stuff out to clients.
I try and be diligent. And
yeah, it seems like pennies at the time and you don't think it's relevant. But in the space of 12 months, those things you think are irrelevant, definitely.
Look, I mean, the costs associated with a website, I mean, you know, they can be quite substantial, depending on how much, again, it's like, you know, depending on how much work you're putting into it, can depend on how much it's going to cost you at the end of the day. So I think it's important to keep track of everything. And then, you know, perhaps either sort it out for yourself by searching the Inland Revenue's files or talking to a bookkeeper and saying, well, can I claim this?
Yeah.
It's better to have a count of it and then, you know, somebody say, no, you can't have that. Well, you can have a percentage of it.
I say that to all my clients. I say, if you think it might be roughly remotely related or you're not sure, put it in the file with your receipts, put it on your spreadsheet, whatever they're doing. I says, and then I'll help you make that decision, whether, like you've just said, no, you can't use it, it's totally a disallowed expense, or right, we can, but we need to work out you can only have a percentage of, or actually, yeah, great, you can have the whole lot of that as part of an expense. And you know, there's no reason not to do it that way, because at the end of the day, it affects your tax bill.
Well, the next one I've got on my list here, training costs. Now, we separate those two from continued professional development, which is totally tax allowable, to the initial training costs. Now, the Inland Revenue have gone back and forward on this over a few years.
The current stance that I'm aware of, in kind of where they're currently sitting, that if it's you starting up retraining yourself to become, then they're not allowing expenses like those to be kind of put through. So if it's an initial training or something new, like a new skill you're doing, then no, they're not kind of allowing that as an expense. If you're updating your existing stuff, so like you said, your CPD and anything that as a driving instructor you're doing year on, year out, however often you're doing anything, that is to kind of keep you up to date with current you know, kind of legislation, protocol, whatever it may be, improving your knowledge and maintaining stuff that your professional body or membership organisations require you to do. That can be kind of a tax allowable expense. Like you said, in terms of kind of, you know, if I go out to train to be kind of a nail technician tomorrow, all my out costs for my training there, I can't chuck that on.
It's interesting, isn't it? But if somebody comes to me for preparation for their standards check that they have to sit every once in a while, they can claim all of that, which is it just seems odd. Now, I have heard it said by people, no names, no pack drill, that some people have sneaked that through as in their capital allowances and got away with it.
The
I
only
suspect
thing,
it's because nobody looked at it.
yeah, I don't think they've got away with it, so to speak, as you say there. I think it's a case of if they were to be audited, that would probably be looked at, and the wholly exclusively and the kind of new initial training side of things would probably then be pulled back. That's the problem, is people do their books and put it through and think, well, nobody said anything, but nobody looks at your books year on year.
Yeah.
That'll only be looked at and picked up on if you're audited.
Yeah.
So people can sit there thinking, well, I've been doing this for years and it's fine and I'm okay, when actually that's only because nobody's looked at it. And the minute they did, if they then went back and realised you've been doing that year on year, that's a lot of money you could be owing them back.
I mean, I want to come back to the other thing on cars, because there was a page that was changed on the HMRC website to say that you couldn't claim flat rate for the car. And a guy sent me a link to it. I was like, what's happened there? And it's changed back now. Thank goodness. I think that was just a clerical error somewhere. Somebody's
There's
made
been
a mistake.
and I've noticed it in a couple of the drive. There was a thing in one of the driving instructor groups in the last month or so where similar, it was about kind of the flat rate claims. The other thing is as well is depending on how you initially set up your car depends on how you can claim, and I think people get confused there as well.
But it was there was a definite change on HMRC website to say that you couldn't, because I always give that as advice when I'm doing the induction for the new instructor, to say once you start claiming a particular way for the car, you've got to claim it that way for the life of the car.
Yeah.
And one of them came back to me and said, that's not the case. I said, no, it is. It is. He said, no, it's not. No, it is. So he sent me the link and I looked and I thought, when did that change? What? And then I looked a week or so later, it had changed back. Yeah. So somebody's made a big boo-boo there.
Because and also how you can claim with you a bog standard car in a business compared to a driving instructor car, that's classed as plant and machinery because it's got the dual control. It's classed slightly differently, so it does have different implications to kind of what you do. But I'd seen that crop up in the last couple of weeks, which set kind of panic alarms, I think, across.
Yeah, well, it did for me. I thought, oh my God, I've given this advice out to 500 instructors. I'm wrong, but it turns out I wasn't. So they've changed the thing back. So it's the next thing is, if it's your first year or your first time using that car, you can work out at the end of the year which way to claim and keep records and think, yeah, it'd be better to do it that way. Yeah. But and then my mate Stuart sent me a question saying that he claimed he'd got a car that he could claim 100% for, but then that's affected him because of the grants that he got for COVID. So we have to be careful and really think about how we're going to do it.
Yeah. So you with driving instructor cars, they can be classed as plant and machinery in the same way, say like a farmer with a tractor. Rather than me with my own car, I can't do anything with that because it's not classed in the same way, so it's treated differently. But for a driving instructor, you've got what you call your annual investment allowance, and because the driving instructor car is classed as plant and machinery, it can be claimed as the full cost in the first year. So if you've earned 40 grand and you buy a car for 10 grand, you've just potentially could take that 10 grand off.
Right. So
do it that way. The problem with that though is that if you claim the 100% in that first year, you've got your guy there who said that it's affected his grants because your income is massively shifted. Then your income looks totally not true to what it was because you've took such a big chunk off in a year. So it has implications in that respect. The other thing, because I saw it on a thread recently, was, well, I'll just keep doing that every year and knock 20 grand off my income every year. But when he sells the car, if he does it after 1, 2, 3 years, the cost of what you've sold it for, the amount you get for that goes back in the pot and kind of comes back off. So for example, we buy a car, 10 grand, keep it for a year. You've claimed that 10 grand back on your self-assessment last year and knocked 10 grand off your income, if you like, your taxable income. You then sell the car a year down the line for 8 grand. That goes back in the books, and when you offset it to the 10 grand you spent, now to the 8 grand, you can now only put 2 grand on the next year as a capital allowance type claim through annual investment allowance. So it's not quite as clear cut, and this is where the car thing becomes such a minefield that people need to be careful how they're putting it through the books. Yeah.
I mean, the only way is to do it is to claim that and then give it away, because if you make any money back on it, same as like printers, computers, that sort of stuff. When you're done with it, don't sell it, give it away or dump it, put it in a skip.
The only thing they'll do though with some of them, if it's been put through your business as an asset and you decide to gift it, they will still look at what the actual current trade value is, and you would have to put that through your books. You can't just kind of give things away for nothing, as nice an idea as that sounds. They would, because obviously everyone would then do that to get away with paying. People do it from a point of view, you know, if you're looking at capital gains tax, they would then look at the current market value rather than just gifting away, because otherwise everyone would just say, I'll give it away.
So you've got to be careful. You've got to get it right, haven't you? So I mean, that's another thing, isn't it? When you start looking at cars, if you're going to use that as like an annual investment allowance, then you've got that. But outside of that, you can either claim a flat rate, which is 45p a mile, isn't it, for the first 10,000 and 25p.
Yeah, if we're talking about the car itself, you can either do the annual investment where you chuck in the whole value of the car on, but like we've just mentioned, there's kind of implications and drawbacks to that. Your other option is what's called a written down allowance. So depending on the emissions of the car, year on year, and it's not the same as depreciation, because depreciation you can't claim as an allowable taxable expense. So what we have under kind of capital investment allowances and stuff is what we call written down allowance. This is where it starts to get quite complex. So what you would do is, instead of claiming the full 10 grand of that car, you'd put that 10 grand in your pot for your written down allowance, and depending on the car's emissions, you'd then be looking at a percentage each year that you can put to offset your tax bill. So it varies between 8 and 18%, I think it is at present. And that might be a more financially viable way of doing it, that instead of putting the whole chunk in one go of that 10 grand at the very beginning, every year you put in a percentage through instead.
Well, from a tax point of view, it's probably, you're maximizing your taxable allowances by keeping that car for 5 and a bit years, aren't you, in reality?
Yeah,
whereas most driving instructors change more regularly.
Yeah, and then if you've claimed 100% at the beginning and you've sold it, and what you're allowed to kind of use the next year. Whereas if you've done the kind of percentage claim and you're offsetting it against your costs, it doesn't quite have the same implication if you've claimed the full 100% on the outset. So it is, I think for you guys in your profession with driving instructing, I think it's really good that if you're looking at doing a car change or altering, some people do leases and PCP, that's another whole other kind of can of worms, so to speak. It would be very beneficial to kind of have that little bit of advice as to these are the options, now go away and what's best for you.
Yeah, even if you pay money to sit down and have an hour with an accountant, even if you have to pay for that, that's probably going to pay for itself.
It might be that it's more complex than just a quick question where you might get, I'm happy to answer little off questions here and there. If it's something more detailed to work out some figures and give you a few options, it might be worth kind of paying that rate and just saying to someone, can I pay for a bit of advice and do it that way? And that might be, another option, and then you can go off and do it yourself.
Well, because to get it wrong is going to be costly, isn't it? Big style.
Yeah, and it's not the other thing with kind of, obviously from kind of my background and profession, it's not a case of, because we can't offer financial advice, which wouldn't be what we'd be offering. In terms of the car situation, it'd be basically, these are the sums on the options that you're thinking of doing, and kind of setting it up that way. So it's not the same as kind of if you go to a financial advisor and they tell you, I don't know, where to invest your money, what to do with your money, and it's kind of on them then. With what we do, it could be a case of, this is my option. So we talked before about the home set up and claiming against your bills. I could sit there for somebody and do the maths for them and go, these are your two options. It's your decision. I can't advise you what to do, but I can tell you what the maths will look like. And it's
that's right. This is what you're allowed to do, and this is the consequences of each of those choices. Choose.
Yeah. So I'm not financially telling you advice-wise what to do, but I'm saying these are your choices, and this is what it might look like with the figures you've given. Yeah.
I mean, that sort of leads into the running costs of the car. Cleaning the thing, putting fuel in it, service costs, all that kind of stuff. If you're going on the flat rate thing, then that's it. You just 45p a mile and then 25. That's always worked out better for me. I've yet to have a year where that wasn't beneficial. Having said that, last year might be different because I didn't do many miles.
No, definitely not. But I would have still thought, I suppose, with the issue of COVID, possibly with things like still having the car insured. The issue is you can't chop and change between those with the car, which is what we've already mentioned. So if you've got a car that you've been using your flat rate for, unfortunately, COVID might benefit you to switch to using the apportionment method and using your actual expenses. However, you're not allowed to do that because you've not changed your car.
No.
So you're a bit stuck in that sense. So again, it's another one of those of working out your calculations, and driving instructors, more so than maybe a profession like my own. You know, the miles are there for that. 45p a mile adds up to a lot of money. Yeah. And again, it could be something that you give that information to a bookkeeper, or you monitor it yourself throughout the year when you first set up. Yes. And that first year you work out, and I've done that for clients and kind of said, right, if this is kind of going to be your average miles and your averaging ins and outs for petrol and other stuff, this figure actually is a lot higher than this one. So
I mean, COVID,
which one do you want to go with?
A unique set of circumstances, isn't it, that are not likely to be repeated. And I think claiming that way for my vehicle over the years has probably gained me loads. So on balance, I'm still going to be all right. Yeah. But as you say, it's getting the right advice is important. The advice is all there on HMRC if you can be bothered to sit down and rake through it. But
it's raking through, but it's interpreting it. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not always written in the nicest way, that it's really easy to kind of get your head around and fully understand and know what's what. If you're, you know, I deal with, like I say, multiple different professions, and their bag and their bit and their thing that they're really good at is what they're doing day to day, whether that be driving, instructing, plumbing, electrics, whatever it be. To then get them to get their head around a whole other technically profession, which what it is, because that's my profession, is a big ask. It's like saying to me, like we said earlier, let's go and learn how to do plumbing because I'm going to fix the sink myself.
Well, that's right. We all look at that and think, what, 75 quid to call a plumber out? I could fix that.
Yeah, and then 3 weeks later,
very rarely ends well.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so the car thing, a couple of other little bits that come into just bog standard expenses. It got brought up, and I think you mentioned it, about things like clothing. So if you've bought yourself things and you've had them branded with your kind of business name or logo, they're great. They're a kind of yes every day of the week. If you've bought stuff specifically that you wear to kind of go out and about for your driving lessons and you don't wear it for anything else, but there's no branding to it, it's a pair of trousers and a jumper from wherever, that's not, because technically they could be used for anything you're doing. Yeah. But if it's clothing that you've had branded, yes. And then obviously you've got a responsibility to keep that clean. So there's also an element of a claim back towards kind of washing, and there's some flat rate expenses for that as well.
But say for keeping the car clean, they'll accept a flat rate for that too, won't they? Is it £7 a week? I can't remember now.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I'd have to find out. But yeah, and it works out, you know, based on some of the car places nowadays. It depends what you want to do with that. If you're going to go into actual expenses, it might be, you know, some of these you're talking £10 a pop, aren't you, to go and have your car done in and out. And I know from things I've picked up, some of the driving instructor kind of bodies and schools that you sit under are quite specific, aren't they, on what you have to do and how clean it has to be. So again,
well, that's right. I mean, I always maintain nothing says sloppy like a dirty car. But
no, and that's like having a messy office, and that's where your clients are coming in, aren't they? You're going to keep it clean. Right.
So yes, I'm just trying to make sure that we've covered everything that's on the list here. I'm sure there'll be stuff that people will think about.
There will, and it will trigger things. That's why I'm happy to, you know, if follow-up questions come up from posting it, then that's fine. I don't know if when you've posted the video, does it come up with the ability to have a bit of a thread underneath?
Yep, it will do. So if anybody has any questions, just pop them in there. Or
yeah, and I'll keep an eye on that over the kind of coming weeks. So, or, you know, and it might be useful to put it in there to start with, because some of the more generic questions would help other people. If it's something very specific and you want to kind of get advice, or you want to have a chat with me about, you know, potentially offsetting and offloading your bookkeeping elsewhere, that might be something where you want to come to me directly. So it's up to you. A couple of other just little bits we hadn't mentioned were things like membership, subscriptions, insurance, traveling. I know they haven't been happening lately because of COVID, but it'll pick up eventually, going back and forth to network meetings. If you have specific kind of magazines or things like that you subscribe to that are linked to wholly and exclusively driving instructing, professional fees, whether it be kind of legal and bookkeeper side of things, you know, all these little bits and bobs, franchise fees for those that are involved in franchise setups, parking, tolls,
but not fines,
bank charges. Say again,
you're not allowed fines.
Yeah, no fines. No, that's not allowable. That's a slap on the wrist and very naughty, and pay yourself.
Especially for driving instructors.
Yes.
But again, stuff like if you're traveling to the driving instructor show and you're staying in a hotel overnight the night before, these are all really considered.
Yeah, that's where it comes to kind of like, you know, if you were going to something like LinkedIn to networking or a specific event, you know, we have them for bookkeepers. And if it's something where, you know, you're required to do it, or it's part of what you're doing in terms of the kind of groups that you're involved in and that kind of stuff, you know, there's lots of other allowable expenses that you can kind of pop in there. And then I suppose the only other thing that we briefly mentioned a little bit was the fixed asset element.
Yeah.
Where you're bringing stuff into your business. You've set up your office there, so you've mentioned about bringing in things like lighting and other bits that are used for your office. They're slightly bigger purchases than potentially kind of, you know, your £100 little bits and bobs. You know, buying staplers and hole punches, they're probably going to last us 10 years, but we wouldn't put them through as a fixed asset because they're such small amounts. We'd offset them as an expense. Computers, machinery, furniture. If you've set up a bit of a home office, you've had desks, computers, chairs, those kind of things could be linked in as fixed assets. And it might be best that, unlike where we talked about the car, you can offset it with the annual investment for 100% of the cost. For these items, you can claim a percentage of year on year for the life and the time that you have it.
And it is surprising how much that, because I've just set this office up here because I've moved across here, but it's amazing the cost involved. You don't really think about it sometimes, but all these little bits and pieces, once you start adding them up, it's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. And if you can offset that, so you would benefit from it by paying a bit less tax over the coming years, because if it's something you've bought in year that we, you know, like I say, a lot of bookkeepers and accountants use that kind of £100 and under expense kind of, if you're putting it through your expenses, kind of 100 and over, chuck it in the capital bit and start claiming that percentage each year. You can be claiming a reduction for your expenses for a number of years based on the lifespan of that item. And then you just kind of refeed it back into the books if you sell it, move it on and get new stuff. And you know, you can always be kind of benefiting from it. It's not something to think, oh, it was only this much, I can't be bothered with the faff. Benefits you in the long run. Everybody wants a smaller tax bill. I don't know anyone who says, no, I want to pay more tax. So anything you can put through to reduce that bill, then do it.
Absolutely. Well, that's been fascinating and an insight. And thank you for sharing your time with us.
Hopefully it wasn't too long and tedious for people. I know it's not the most exciting subject in the world, but it's very important.
Absolutely, because to get it wrong is extremely costly. If you get it right, then it's going to save you money. And I always say, if you go to a bookkeeper or an accountant, you know, if you're working in ways that they're asking you to work in, they're going to save you money, probably at least 5 times what you're paying them.
Yeah.
I always say that you want a good accountant and a good bookkeeper.
I also, say to clients as well is, if you're working and following everything I'm asking you to, little things like the late penalties for fining late, well, that's not going to be an issue because I'm working with you in real time. That's £100 straight away. You're not going to end up incurring if you follow what I want you to do and you do what I need you to month on month. That's something that you'll never incur as a cost. If you also work with me and do the things that I'll suggest because we know what your tax liability might be, so you can save for it, then you're not going to end up having things like late penalties for also paying the amount after you've potentially filed it late. You're not going to incur the interest that they'll start chucking on it because you haven't paid it all up at the right deadline. And then payments on account is the same. You know, you're not prepared for these things because.
Well, I think it's an interesting point. You say that, yes, interest on the amount, but you're also getting them interested in you. Why is this guy always there? What's the problem here? Let's have him in.
Yeah, he might flag you up on a system somewhere because you're constantly in the bad book, so to speak, and on their blacklist.
Just a little anecdote. No idea of how true this is, but I worked with a guy years and years ago when I was a mechanic in a former life. He used to own his own place. I knew the guy. It was really quite big and successful, this garage that he ran. And I said, we're sitting having a cup of tea one day. I said, what's made you come to work in a place like this when you used to have your own place? He said, oh, well, you know. He said, a bit of a run-in with the tax man. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, well, they had me in and said, but, you know, I nearly said his name there, Mr. Such and Such. You have a boat at the local boatyard. You've got a really big flash house. You go on foreign holidays 4 and 5 times a year. Your children are both at private school, and yet you're paying no tax. How are you funding that lifestyle? And he allegedly said to them, well, I've been thieving.
I was just blunt and up front with him.
He said they couldn't do a thing about it. But he said, I've now had to get my house in order. Now, I don't know how true that is, but it's an amusing anecdote.
It must be kind of slightly true in some respects, because it's part of kind of some of the training we do from a money laundering point of view. Essentially what it is, because some of the examples that we're giving through some of the training and courses and our regular money laundering, updates that we do, is looking for those type of clients. They're earning 20 grand a year, but like you said, the kids are in private school, they're going off on cruises, abroad holidays that cost thousands, they've got flash cars, several of them, but you're earning 20 grand a year.
Well, if you're watching, Robert, I now believe you.
So yeah, you've got one of the examples I had was kind of, somebody who runs a cleaning company. Yeah, they've got a 5-bed house. They're running a cleaning company where people are paying them maybe £10-20 an hour to come and clean the house. And they've got a 5-bed house, flash car. And their tax bill is fairly minimal. So yeah, there's lots of key things to look out for. And going back to line of duty and the kind of organised crime element of it, look at the kind of stuff going on there where they were running money through different entities. Obviously not on that scale, and I'm hoping to not come across that kind of client, but people funny what people do, and the cash backhanders that don't go through. So
well, thank you ever so much for sharing your time with us. I hope people have got something from it, and if they have any questions, stick them in the comments below here. And again, VW Tax Returns on Facebook. And the number was, if I've got that right, 07765 744 751.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, fab. Thank you.
It wasn't that hard. I've got it on the screen next to me here. No. You've got your website up.
But you're doing like a Rain Man thing.
I'm just absolutely no. God, no. My head's old and knackered. Can't do that sort of stuff. Thanks ever so much, Vicky. I'll hopefully speak to you again in January when we'll maybe do this again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, keep in touch. Speak to you later. Thank you.
Bye for now.